Trump gives Iran 2 weeks as negotiations continue. The Center Square's Enterprise and Investigations Unit making impact, America's talking, and Illinois' school choice fight. This is the Center Square Daily for Wednesday, April 8th, 2026. I'm your host, Greg Bishop. Just before Tuesday's deadline to begin taking out Iran's critical infrastructure, President Donald Trump is giving Iran 2 more weeks to make a deal as taxpayers continue to spend on military operations estimated to cost $1 billion a day. The ceasefire comes after the Pakistani government submitted a 2-week proposal that includes Iran agreeing to an immediate and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. The president calls it a double-sided ceasefire, underscoring that the U.S. has already met and exceeded all military objectives and are very far along with a definitive agreement concerning long-term peace with Iran and peace in the Middle East. As to the economic pinch on American drivers filling up at the pumps, AAA shows another increase over yesterday in the price per gallon, now at $4.16. Just this morning, War Secretary Pete Hegseth said commercial ships will pass through the Strait of Hormuz during this 2-week ceasefire. The Center Square's Washington, D.C. Bureau Chief Sarah Roderick-Fitch was in front of Hegseth this morning with some important questions for the administration after that self-imposed deadline was extended.
2 questions actually for you. So during this time, is the president are you still encouraging civilians to rise up against the regime, or are they satisfied with this new regime change, or is this two-week period to kind of see where that leads? Also, talked about the enriched uranium going in there. Would that require special forces or other military, our service members? Who would be basically going in there and trusted to going in there to get that uranium out?
Mm-hmm. Again, on the uranium, we're watching it. We know what they have, and they will give it up, and we'll get it, and we'll take it. If we have to, we can do it in any means necessary. So that's something the president is going to solve for. We already have Midnight Hammer with the place we put them in, and the reason it's in the situation where it is. The second one was about the people. Listen, I would love to see the Iranian people take advantage of this opportunity. They have been oppressed by the previous regime, and they'll have a new opportunity with this regime. That remains to be seen. That was not our objective in this effort, but they're brave people. Horrible things have been done to them by the previous regime. Tens of thousands targeted and killed and assassinated in a way the government never should. And we wish them the best, absolutely. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Well, joining us now is our Washington, D.C. reporter at the White House, Sarah Roderick-Fitch, who you heard asking those questions of the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, this morning. Sarah, you're at the White House now. There's a lot of moving pieces here, a lot of pieces on the chessboard that are going in for the attack, but now we've got a 2-week pause for more negotiations. What are you hearing there on the ground, and what can we expect as taxpayers in the next 2 weeks?
I'll put it this way, there are a lot of questions, and kind of helpful that there was 2 briefings two briefings today, this morning at the Pentagon with Secretary Pete Hegseth and General Dan Kane. And then this afternoon, going to be one with Caroline Leavitt. We're not sure if there's going to be anybody joining her, but yeah, there are a lot of questions, as well as Secretary General of NATO, Mark Rutte, is going to be here visiting the White House this afternoon. So there's going to be a lot of unanswered questions still swirling around this ceasefire deal. The president is releasing some tweets or some true socials out. There's some information trickling about what it is. There's apparently the Iranians are supposed to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Now there's questions on whether or not they're going to be requiring a toll. Well, now that I'm hearing indications that that's going to be something jointly between the U.S. and Iran. Which is interesting because it wasn't that way before. This is an international waterway. So it'll be interesting to see how this is received with other countries, especially ones that really rely so much on the Strait of Hormuz and getting their oil production. Among those, China, South Korea, Japan, Australia, a lot of European countries. We only take in less than 1% from the Strait of Hormuz. So this could rack up, but there's indications that the president is seeing these as possible, like some of these tolls, as perhaps a way to sort of rebuild Iran. But there's a lot of questions too, as regards to who's now running Iran. Who is this? Who's this new regime? Are they still going to support these the protesters? Rising up. That wasn't one of the objectives. Secretary Hegseth told me this morning that it's still not an objective. However, they do still support the Iranian people rising up. So, will this 2-week pause? Is the president allowing this 2-week pause to kind of say, "Hey, come on out. We're not bombing anymore"? When he started this campaign, he initially said, "Hey, stay in your houses," but he encouraged the Iranian people to rise up. So this could be an opportunity for the administration and the international community to really take to the Iranian people, saying, "Here's your opportunity to rise up." I mean, there's a lot of questions, I think, for the next 2 weeks. From what I'm hearing, is there's going to be negotiations on this 15-point plan that the White House has proposed for Iran. It's going to be taking place in Pakistan. We're hearing rumors that the vice president may be involved in this, possibly Steve Witkoff. Not sure exactly where this is going, but it'll be really interesting to see what comes from today, from the news conference, if there's more indications and just more details about this ceasefire.
And as you mentioned, you've got representatives of NATO meeting with the president. So a lot of things happening, and we've got the reporters on the ground at the Center Square. So be sure to get to thecentersquare.com for the very latest. Sarah, thank you so much for taking time with us. Now with the Center Square Daily, we ask that question: who's watching how your tax dollars are being spent? With the recent headlines from the Center Square's Enterprise and Investigations Unit, it's clear that team digging deep and holding government to account for the taxpayer. Joining the Center Square Daily is Enterprise and Investigations Unit's managing editor, Arthur Kane. Art, from lavish perks and members of Congress giving themselves to large amounts of overtime being handed out to a local jail in Pennsylvania, your team continues to uncover these secrets that don't get a lot of sunlight at all, and they're taking decision makers to task. Tell us about the team and what is their focus.
So we got a great team. We got 4 people, a 5th one coming on soon, whose job really is only to look at what government is doing with taxpayer money. And I think it's necessary because I think a lot of other media has decided to not look at that. The stories we did on the Senate spending, and I also did a series later last year in November on House spending, are really readily available in online, and very few people write about it. So I wanted our whole investigative team to dig into those things, and we found a lot of interesting things. $1 million a year of private jets, limos, strange, unusual jobs that taxpayers are paying for, like wellness consultants and a chaplain who has his own PR person and chief of staff. A lot of stuff that there's a lot of places to dig, and we're going to be doing the digging that some other media might not.
And people can find congressional perks. The latest story: U.S. senators spend big on checks to themselves, won't share those records. And it's not just digging through these records. I mean, you even had reporters get in front of the likes of former Senate leader Mitch McConnell, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the Senate is they feel like they don't have to answer reporters' questions a lot because a lot of reporters in Washington have allowed them not to do that. And so we reached out to their PR people for anybody we were writing about. But we have a Washington-based investigative reporter, and Mark spent a couple of days trying to find them in public places to talk to them, to give them every opportunity to comment. A lot of them we couldn't find, and there's a lot of rules and regulations there on where we can shoot and what we can film, which I don't necessarily think is a good thing since it's taxpayer-funded capital, right? But yeah, we had to chase some of these guys down, and a lot of them still didn't talk.
And the Congressional Perks investigation recently showing how impactful it is by being featured in a recent Fox News segment where, Art, you joined the host there to talk about that. But it's not just, the story that gets, the other media to look at. It's also the stories that really just gets in front of the taxpayer, even on that local level. Tell us about that county jail operation in Pennsylvania where overtime costs are, in some cases, exceeding how much people are making a year?
Well, I mean, I think, yes, we focused on one county there. But I think this is not an uncommon practice in public safety around the country. And you're right. The local papers don't have the resources or sometimes the interest to look at it. But we're talking about some people who make twice their salary because of overtime. There's serious questions that are raised with that. A, you're paying somebody time and a half, or you could pay somebody single time. Now they say benefits outweigh that and pensions and stuff like that. Maybe that's the case. But then you have corrections officers who are working 80 hours a week who are tired and endanger themselves and possibly their colleagues because they're not at the top of their games. Same things happen with police, firefighters. A lot of these people are making $200,000-$300,000. I think one of the people highlighted in the in Mark's stories was someone who was making more than the police chief, which is really strange because the police chief has a lot more responsibility than a corrections officer and should be compensated that way. Unfortunately, that's the way the system is done now, and they have all kinds of people who are just making more and more money off of taxpayers because of they won't hire or they just want to give it to favored people.
Art, as you said, this is one story in Pennsylvania County, but it's something that's pervasive all across the country. And these are not just at state level, public safety organizations like, a state prison, for instance, but even gets down to the county level with county jails or, police officers or and I think it's really important you highlight that somebody in this capacity working 80 hours a week, that can be dangerous.
Yeah, it can be. And it can be dangerous for the inmates. It can be dangerous for the staff. And it can be dangerous for that person. But I guess when someone is offering you an extra $150,000 a year to work that, and you can, buy a new car and a nicer house and stuff like that, some people take advantage of that. And we see a lot of problems when especially law enforcement and public safety officers are doing that. Mistakes happen, shootings happen that shouldn't happen. Inmates may be able to get out, things like that actually injure public safety. So I think all of the best practices say you shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, and you got to think too. I mean, obviously the public safety aspect and the safety of the government employee, and then those that they're meant to look after. That's one thing, but then you get to the cost aspect to the taxpayer, but the potential liabilities if somebody is found to have done something inappropriately because they're working 80 hours a week and they're exhausted. I mean, that could be another taxpayer liability. But Art, obviously, these are some really compelling stories. One that's hit close to home, and it's been an ongoing series from your reporter Jared Strong at the Center Square's Investigative Unit, and that is the ongoing questions around Illinois' Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. It's made some impact. State senators from both sides of the aisle looking at the Center Square reporting saying, what gives?
Well, we've only been a full unit for about 6 months, and this is definitely our most impactful series because you have lawmakers on both sides of the fence. You have Democrats and Republicans both saying something has to be done. So basically, if you haven't read the story, there's a few years ago, Illinois instituted a new diversity committee. It is doing worse than the old one as far as getting contracts for minority and female-owned businesses. The commissioners are paid $150,000 a year, work part-time, unlike other commissioners in Illinois who have to work full-time. They have side jobs. And they're just not they're doing worse. Even if you support set-asides and things like that, they are doing worse in getting those set-asides in the prior committee and spending a lot more money. So Jared's done a series of stories, and lo and behold, lawmakers on both sides are starting to question them. There's lawmakers this month, I think on the 1st, in the Senate questioning them, and they're going to be in the House next week questioning them. So
yeah, and we've got that segment from last week where during a Illinois Senate committee hearing looking into this, a Republican and a Democrat both questioning this commission as to what kinds of real outcomes are they giving the taxpayers for these $150,000 salaries.
I respectfully, the Prison Review Board and other boards making this amount of money are full-time gigs. And if it takes making this a full-time gig to get this figured out, maybe that's what needs to happen.
Now, I know you say we're heading in the right direction, but I'm telling you that business owners that we are talking to are not saying that. They are not saying we're heading in the right direction. They're not saying that things are looking better. They're saying consistently things are looking worse.
Again, shedding light on these issues with documented evidence to what's going on. This is just a sampling of what the Center Square's investigative unit is up to. Art, what are we looking at down the road here? What other kinds of rocks are you and your team continuing to uncover?
Well, we can't say too much, right? Because we have competition, but we're definitely looking at nationwide what kind of fraud is happening. We've seen some of it in other media and our media about daycares and Medicare and Medicaid fraud, and we've written some of it already, but we're going to take a deeper look, I think, system-wide on that. We're looking at some of the funding of trans clinics, things like that. We are beefing up in California, which is obviously very problematic. They've got the train to nowhere that's cost a lot of money that has gone nowhere. They've got all kinds of questions about what they're doing with money there. So all those things are definitely on our ticket.
Well, can't wait to see the ongoing investigative reporting from the EEIU unit there. Art, Kane, greatly appreciate it. And people can get those stories at thecentersquare.com. Sign up for the newsletter to stay on top of that and so much more. Now it's time for America's Talking, with headlines impacting you, the taxpayer, from across the country. You can find these stories in the description below. And again, get that free newsletter at thecentersquare.com. We'll start in California, where gas prices climbed as high as $6 a gallon as oil prices skyrocketed ahead of President Donald Trump's deadline to continue operations there. But you've got the Strait of Hormuz that's expected to be reopened. Before that announcement, prices rose in the Southwest before that 2-week ceasefire was unveiled. With an average price of $5.93 a gallon, California continued to be well above the national average, with one motorist in Anaheim paying $44.09 for just 7.35 gallons of regular gas Sunday. Republican Lookout Mountain Judicial Circuit District Attorney Clay Fuller won Georgia's 14th congressional district seat Tuesday, staving off Democrat Sean Harris. Returns from Republican strongholds of Murray and Walker counties spurred Fuller to the 55.89% of the vote compared to Harris's 44.11%. Fuller had the backing of President Donald Trump, who Monday encouraged his social media followers to get out and vote for Fuller. The post was formally held by Rome Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene. She resigned in January following a public feud with Trump. Greene did not endorse anyone in that race. In Wisconsin, Judge Chris Taylor won that state's Supreme Court race over conservative candidate Maria Lazar on Tuesday, increasing the amount of liberal justices on the court to a 5-2 advantage compared to conservatives, with another conservative seat up for election next year. Multiple media outlets called the race less than an hour after the polls closed, with Taylor holding a 60% to 39% advantage, when just 95% of the votes counted. Taylor will serve a 10-year term. Taylor is a former Democratic Party state representative who has also represented Planned Parenthood as a lawyer. And a controversial bill Ohio Republican lawmakers say is aimed at protecting children is rankling free speech and LGBT advocates as it awaits consideration in the Ohio Senate. Its authors say the Indecent Exposure Modernization Act, which passed the House 63-32, is a common sense update to existing obscenity laws. Others contend it addresses a problem that does not exist, with obscenity laws already on the books to protect children. New law that would limit shows that could be, quote, harmful to juveniles or obscene to adults' cabarets. Police would be responsible for interpreting the law on a case-by-case basis as they counter potential violations. The Ohio ACLU testified against the law, warning that it could bring about a chilling effect on free speech. And that's just some of what America's talking about with the center square. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Center Square Daily. I'm your host, Greg Bishop. Now let's focus on Illinois, where state legislators in the land of Lincoln have until a May 31st deadline to pass a plan for how to spend your tax dollars for the coming fiscal year. While the governor is asking for a slightly leaner spending plan than the current year, spending requests for some agencies continue to increase. Tuesday, during a House Appropriations Committee, Illinois State Board of Education State School Superintendent Tony Sanders, he discussed their request of $10.9 billion for the state's schools, saying it's less than the current year's budgets. But another state agency that Governor J.B. Pritzker created a few years ago, the Illinois Department of Early Childhood, came into view during yesterday's hearing. That new agency was sold to streamline services for early childhood by taking a variety of services from several different state agencies and consolidating them into one. Republican State Representative Blaine Wilhauer questioned the Illinois State Board of Education if there's really going to be efficiencies for taxpayers.
They're taking workload off of you guys, and your budget requests are still higher than they were before.
Correct.
And you have the same or more employees today than you did before we created this completely new government agency.
Yes, we're requesting the same number of headcount.
Okay.
It's a little bit different because we are not a code agency, and so we have to do our negotiations separately with our unions. We do not fall under the Central Management Services, and so that process looks a little bit different for the State Board of Education than it did for departments like Human Services and DCFS.
Yeah, but I think that if we asked them the same thing, their headcounts would be more than they are, and their budgets would be more than they were before. So we're really not streamlining government with this new agency.
Wilhauer also recognized the largest line item on Illinois taxpayers' property taxes, and that is schools. Illinois already has the highest property taxes in the country.
Why are property taxes so high?
Again, that's a local issue. Local school districts must make the determination of what it takes to operate their local school system, taking into account state, federal funds, and then what they need locally to survive. It's an individual question for individual school boards about why their local property taxes continue to increase.
Now, Wilhauer seemed to be just getting started with his questions for the state's schools chief. He also asks about the state's standards for student efficiency and proficiency, which were recently adjusted.
Why did the State Board of Education dumb down proficiency expectations in the last year?
So we didn't dumb down the proficiency expectations. We changed the cut scores for the statewide assessments. So as a reminder, when Illinois back in 2014 set new proficiency standards for Illinois students, they chose to go with a cut score in the SAT that was higher than what the College Board says was college ready, making us one of the most restrictive states in the country as it relates to cut scores.
So we lowered standards.
No,
though.
the standards remain the same. What we expect students to learn and be able to do remain exactly the same today as they did a year ago.
But there could be people that were not proficient before that would be proficient now because of the standards being lowered.
Again, the standards weren't lowered. The cut score was lowered.
Is that true or false?
We did not lower the standard.
That debate continues. Meanwhile, on the issue of education choice, Wilhauer noted a lot of other states taking advantage of a national school choice scholarship program. Illinois, despite having had a similar state program where private dollars are gifted to scholarship granting organizations for a tax deduction, that program having sunset, Wilhauer asked why Illinois has not joined that national program, which is set to start next year.
Right now, there's people in the state of Illinois, individual citizens that can donate to this private scholarship fund. They can donate to it. They can get a tax credit for it. But kids in Illinois can't access it because politically, apparently, it's unviable for this governor, and apparently it's unviable for the state board of education. I'm just wondering why.
Yeah, we've reviewed the big beautiful bill and how it's stated in there. We are still awaiting the rules, though, to come down from the Department of Labor that would actually spell out the rules that would have to be followed for us to implement this program in the state.
What specifically do you want to know? I'm all about. I will help you get answers on that because I know that there's multiple states that's done that. I've heard multiple people come in here and give that, and frankly, it sounds like an excuse.
Now, after that back and forth between Wilhour and Sanders, the committee's chair, Democratic State Representative Will Davis, challenged Wilhour.
Okay, well, I'm just wondering
you're going to make that call, Representative?
What's that?
You're going to make that call to Trump to tell him to send the rules?
Let's do it, yeah.
All right. Then when they get the rules, they can move forward.
I am sure these multitude of other states, both Republican administrations and Democrat administrations, aren't just completely flying by the seat of their pants on this.
Without the rules, they probably are. Oh. So if you can help us get those rules, we appreciate it.
Well, let's see what we can do on that, and I eagerly anticipate everybody jumping on board once we get these rules.
Again, that program set to take part next year, with individual taxpayers being able to contribute to a national fund and a tax credit from that, but Illinois has yet to opt in. But during yesterday's committee hearing, Republicans weren't done with their questions. Republican State Representative Martin McLaughlin asked the schools chief about teacher-to-children ratios and why there are fewer students but more teachers.
So you then believe, based on the numbers from 9 years ago, they were insufficient based on the number of teachers to student ratio? Now we are 15,000 more teachers with 200,000 less students. Are we there yet? I guess is my question for taxpayers.
I have to do the math. We can certainly look to do the division on the evidence-based funding formula to see if we can align up numbers of positions based on what the formula says it should be. I've not done that. We can certainly look to do that.
Again, schools costing taxpayers a substantial amount in their local property taxes, and that money goes to local school districts. But on top of that, you've got the Illinois State Board of Education requesting about $1 out of every $5 that the state collects in income tax to go to K through 12 schools. $10.9 billion that ISB is requesting. We'll be keeping an eye on that with the team on the ground at the Illinois State Capitol. Be sure to get the newsletter in your inbox with the very latest. Go to thecentersquare.com. Well, from my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop, and you can join us back here Thursday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from all around the country, only with the Center Square Daily.